The Michael Hatfield RE/MAX team presents Real Estate and More.
Bay Area real estate is different than in all of America. And why? What's up with home buyers? What's on sellers' minds? How is the market? And much, much more.
Now, here's your host, Michael Hatfield.
Well, welcome to the Real Estate and More show. I'm so glad you tuned in. You know, I've been thinking a lot about community and what it actually means. Just coming back from a very nice 4-day celebration of a very respected woman in Scottsdale. And there was over 130 family, friends, and people that were there that I could tell really cared about her and her family. And I'm thinking, well, how do you get to that point? How, in our busy lives that we have every day, how do you actually get to that point where someone actually cares? Well, I broke it down, started thinking in my own life, what do I do that is not optimum as far as talking with people? And then I realized that that device that I carry in my pocket is one of the things that slows everything down and as far as relationship. I mentioned once before on the air that back in the days of flying airplanes, they say the more senses that you can use to take in a piece of information, the better. So meaning if you can smell something, touch something, see something, hear something, then you can take it in through all of those senses, then you're going to understand it and remember it a lot better. In my case, I think that when I distract myself from the talk or whatever is going on by looking at my in-pocket device, I think that what I do is I actually cause some ripples with a relationship. So I've somewhat taken on as a going forward thought that I want to keep that thing in my pocket a lot more and look people in the eye and actually talk to them as people, as someone that's important, someone that is meaningful, and not just something to while away the time with. You know, going out to coffee, you take the time and you connect if you keep that device in your pocket, and you hear each other in what they say a lot better. And I'm finding that in my vintage that's something that I really want to do. There's a lot of optimism in the air from people that I hear about 2025 going forward, not only in real estate, but in the actual economy. And the reason seems to be unilaterally that the economy that we live in, that we end up paying our bills with, is actually driven by energy. As far as real estate, there has been, the last few days, a lot more calls that we're receiving for services than we had been in the past year of 2024. So I'm optimistic about that. And as related before, we have the local associations of realtors that are predicting that in 2025 that there will be 10.5% roughly more transactions, that's buy-sell transactions, than we've had in 2024. So that's kind of good news. And so now we say, well, what about the affordability side? The general consensus and my crystal ball, and everyone should have their own crystal ball and not rely on mine, is that in 2025 we should see 5% mortgage interest rates. That will help the buyers that are looking to buy. It'll give them an opportunity to come in and say, hey, you know, that makes a lot of sense at that payment per month. So that's what I'm hoping. One negative that we've seen is the increasing of HOAs to the point where the cost per month has become, I wouldn't say untenable, but less manageable, put it that way, than we have seen in the past. We've seen the number of HOAs also grow in the United States of America. You know, back to this communication thing that I started out talking about. how people enjoy community and how important it is. When I grew up, my entire family was coming to visit on a weekly basis, and we would have dinners and we would have meals, and we would talk, and know each other much, much better than we do today. So I'm thinking that if we could get back to that, to where people are talking with people more than paying attention to the gadgets, having that Sunday meal like you see on Blue Bloods on television, those kind of actions can be very important to holding a family together, to making it more solidified towards the members of the family, towards each other, and making it so much better. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Real Estate Minute with RE/MAX expert Michael Hatfield. Michael, what traits should we look for in selecting an agent?
Look for a deal maker with a positive attitude who will work tirelessly for you. An agent who is adept in multiple offer situations, drafting contracts, marketing and advertising a client's home, is familiar with multiple cultures, experienced in mortgage financing, inspections, and escrow, is a huge asset to his client.
What can you do as a plus for clients?
Your agent is your eyes and your ears, one who works behind the scenes on your behalf. A great attitude, working well with others, and keeping clients' priorities number one is a given for us.
Call 925-322-7775 now to schedule an appointment or complimentary home analysis. For excellence in real estate, call the Michael Hatfield RE/MAX team at 925-322-7775 or go to michaelhatfieldhomes.com.
Well, we were in the market to buy a house in Pleasanton for a very long time. So we saw this beautiful house. We walk in, we see Michael and Nancy. We just absolutely loved this house. Michael brought in a wealth of knowledge and experience to the whole home buying process. He was very professional, and both Michael and Nancy went way above and beyond to help us achieve the house of our dreams.
Now, back to our show. Well, we on our real estate business side of things, we look to make friends and develop a great relationship first while we're in the process explaining the contract and the disclosures and things of such, the advisories, acknowledgments, and while we do this, we're looking to build a relationship of mutual trust and respect. And to get that respect, I feel that you really have to give out a little bit in order to receive it back. So I'm thinking a lot about that as we approach the holiday season. And just recently, I had Christy Graham. She is a podcast host and radio host. It's On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse with Christy Graham. And I realized in her talk that everything she did came from the heart. She really felt what she was saying, what she was doing, what the organization, the humanitarian organization, Samaritan's Purse, does in countries where they're war-torn, they're needy due to natural disasters. She really felt that. And I have to say that to me, when someone feels it, you can identify it just immediately. Well, I've been sitting here pontificating to everybody about community and being able to communicate and everything else. And in walks a good friend of mine, Mr. Pat Vitucci, a well-known radio and television host. Welcome, Pat.
Well, thanks, Michael. It's always a pleasure being here.
I know you had to say a few things on this subject, so it's always a pleasure to hear what those are. I've been talking, Pat, about how important it is to gather in community and talk and work with each other in a way that's meaningful. And, how many times have you and I went off to coffee?
Yeah, it's been very important in my life, and I know it's been important in your life as well. Sense of community, and we find it in the office, we find it in your church or place of worship. He who gathers in his name in a sense of community is a very powerful way of communicating with each other, communicating with your maker, whoever that may or may not be. But there's a deep sense of a relationship that we build. You and I have coffee. We've shared, some things that we may not necessarily share with other people. But when you go into a larger group, it's a pretty lonely world out there, Michael. And sadly, people are buttoned up and they don't share their life and they don't go out of their house, or may not even know your neighbors anymore. Years ago, you knew all your neighbors and their kids' names. And nowadays, frankly, sadly, I don't know some of my neighbors. You never see them. The garage door opens via electronic button. The car goes in. Before they get out of the car, the garage door is down. You can't even say, hey, how was your day today? Or how are your kids doing? How's your job doing? How's your wife doing? Would you like to go out to dinner? It's just not that sense. There was a comic I heard recently. Years ago, when the doorbell rang, you would run to the door and everybody exit and say, oh, we have company. Come on in. Let's have coffee. Let's have dinner. Now, the doorbell rings and you turn the TV down. You get real quiet. You look at everybody and say, quiet. Don't be talking, because you don't know who's going to be at the door. You don't even want to answer the door. I mean, just in the last 30 or 40 years, we've flipped on that.
So good. When I was a kid, our family would come from all over the States, and I'd wake up a Saturday morning, I'd be stepping over bodies to get to the kitchen, and that would be cousin from here and cousin from there, and everybody would talk all hours of the night. There wasn't that gadget, which cell phones tend to rob, I think, our communication amongst each other, don't you think?
I remember Halloween night. We never locked our doors. My cousin and my two cousins came in the front door. The door was unlocked in this costume, and they scared the heck out of us. But I'm thinking, my gosh, we not only had the little knob on the doorknob, but now we have dead bolts and alarm systems, and it's sad that we've come this far. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was kind of a more friendly, more communicative world that we lived in. We kind of depended on each other. Now we're doing Facebook and all these other softwares that we don't look at each other eyeball to eyeball. It's funny, you see a family out to dinner, husband and wife and two kids. They're all sitting there on their phones reading or playing games. Nobody's talking to each other.
No. It's incredible. One of the things I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm not going political, I'm just saying over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been hit in the pocketbook. Our economy has taken more out of our pockets than it used to before it got to the dinner table. You go to the grocery store, you find that, oh my gosh, I come out with one little bag and that's $150, and you don't really have the buying power that you used to have, and that's a big deal. And a lot of people are looking in an optimistic way to this next year coming ahead.
Yeah, there seems to be just a lot of enthusiasm. So many more people are plugged into the political world. I mean, years ago, I was not that interested. Now I've become political junkie, where I'm watching this stuff all the time. And yeah, I think you're right, Michael. There is a sense of excitement for 2025 and beyond. Mm-hmm. And it all cascades down from the top. I think, not to sound political, but you have to have a charismatic leader that seems to care, maybe genuinely does care, about you and me and how much the price of eggs are, right? And so that gets real infectious, and it does trickle down to guys that look. When President Reagan was in office for 8 years,
yes,
he had that sense of leadership that you really were kind of proud, despite his political party he was affiliated with. But there was a sense of American pride. even when he did the terrible thing of shutting down the air traffic controllers because they went on strike and they were not allowed. It was illegal for them to strike, and airline travel came to a screeching halt. You well know the airline business, so and you kind of rallied behind him and said, "Yeah, he's right. It's illegal for them to strike. They struck. They lost their jobs, and so they had to rehire and retrain a lot of folks." But I think we're getting into that period of life again where we're kind of proud to be Americans again, and the priorities, I think, are more in line with the American spirit.
Well, it was actually yesterday. I went into the coffee shop and this lady held the door for me. I couldn't believe it. And also comparing the amount of clientele in that coffee shop compared to 2 months ago. There's a lot more people in there, and there seems to be a spirit of happier faces, politeness, I don't know if you want to say correctness, but you see respect there. And whether or not they like you, whether or not they like your opinions, whether or not your thoughts on a certain subject are conducive to what they think, doesn't seem to matter.
Michael, we need each other. We really need each other. I think that comes out screaming. You and I are both obnoxiously outgoing, maybe, and maybe it turns a lot of people off. But I personally need to associate with other people in my day, in my office, in my life. I go on vacation with friends and for weeks at a time, and it's nice to have alone time. It's nice to have quiet time. Pick up a good book and have some quiet time. But I got to balance it out with sharing my obnoxious personality with other people that can tell me to be quiet, or you're really wrong on that topic, and you debate. You have a deliberate interaction with people, and I think that's healthy. And I think we've gotten away from that in the past.
I totally agree. Well, let's look back a couple decades. We went through 9/11 and that big story, and that affected us for a lot of years. But then, all of a sudden, community rallied around the American flag and said, we're all part of this wonderful, wonderful country together. Let's work together and let's go forward from there. And a couple years later, then things were moving back again and going in the direction that it's an enjoyable country. And then we had the Middle East crisis. We've had the economic distress of 2007 through 2012. And then we went into the virus season. We went through that. This country's been through a lot. And now it's so nice to see young people turning off their social media, saying, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not going to spend all my time on my cell phone looking at it. I'm going to raise my children. I'm going to have them sit at the table. I'm going to have them learn to communicate and develop those skills, unlike you may see years ago. And I think that's a really great thing moving ahead.
I think your point about folks working from home just further exacerbated that loneliness. I know specifically some people who got so lonely and frankly antisocial when they had to be stuck at home for a couple of years, really. And now, just recently, I've learned the federal government is now going to demand that federal workers all come back to work. Here I thought everybody was back to work, and I've learned recently that federal workers are now, effective January, going to be forced to go back to work 5 days a week. Oh my God, how reasonable is that?
What's really amazing is I just showed a property yesterday. It's a lease office suite, and there's like multiple offices in there, about 4,000 square feet of office space. And this potential tenant looks at me and says, well, people are still staying at home. They're not coming to work. I said, well, maybe they should. And maybe we should look forward to the fact of coming back and have the community rally around, have a tribal effect when we look to conquer some business target or objective. That's one of the things.
Look, you can face a challenge alone, but it's so much easier when you've got a team that you can bounce ideas off of. I mean, it's been shown that all the ramifications of COVID-19 and the whole sequestering issue has really been a really focus of some social issues that were not all that positive, and thankfully we're getting out of it slowly, maybe. But I think the more people depend on each other, and the ideas you get just at the water cooler from one of your co-workers, maybe you've got a half-baked idea, but somebody fills in the other half, and now your half-baked idea sounds like it may have merit if you twist and turn it a little bit and modify it a little bit. Now you've got a kernel of perhaps something that would work really well, and I think that's the dynamic that we've been missing.
You know, when I was a kid, I used to get really anxious or nervous about, who's going to be elected, or this potential war. Or I was at the time in the 60s when Nikita Khrushchev was putting rockets on the island of Cuba. And I was all nervous about that. And then there was, flus, and there were issues like that. And I remember one time Mom just kind of put her arm around me and she says, there'll always be wars, famines, disasters, and plagues. Evil is also everywhere. The question is what will you do to deal with that and to make things better? Start with your own thoughts about how you can make things better.
Yeah, there's the whole pragmatic issue of life is not always a bowl full of cherries, right? We've got good days, we've got bad days. But fortunately, we're blessed in this country with a whole lot more good days than bad. I mean, when you watch the news and you see all these war-torn areas and streets and blocks and cities just absolutely decimated, and then you look out your window and you see these beautiful landscaping and trees, and we're pretty fortunate not to be in the middle of some of those countries. And so, yeah, you've got to stay optimistic, and yeah, sometimes life gets you down, but I think that when you have a sense of community and a sense of belonging, there's friends and family will bring you up again there, because individually we can all get sad and depressed, but that's what family and friends are for, is to break you out of that funk, if you will, and get you to a more positive day.
Would you say that inspiration, joy, hope, happiness, and all of that is absolutely paramount in how a person goes forward to enjoy their life?
Well, look, I have been blessed with a spiritual life, and whether you believe in God or not, there's some inner voice that talks to you every day, and I think you've got to be able to listen to that inner voice, and thank your Maker for every breath that you take. And I think I just read the other day, President elect Trump is going to bring the Bible back into schools. And bring the Pledge of Allegiance back in the schools. I didn't even know the Pledge of Allegiance was not being said every day. Every morning we would stand up and pledge of allegiance, because we were happy to be part of this country. And so I think our school system's got to get back into those basic fundamental things, and maybe even a blessing of some sort, without specifically talking about a specific superpower of whoever your God is. You think standing and have these children bless their day and thank their God for being able to be there that day.
I gotta say that I really find that when I was talking with Christy Graham, who represents Samaritan's Purse, one of I think they're number 23 as far as the largest humanitarian organizations that are out there. And they go into these war-torn countries. They go into Appalachia, where we've had Hurricane Helene create so much devastation and death, and also into the tornado regions of Oklahoma. But they go in there, but they take faith with them. And so whether or not you are a Christian or whether or not you're of some other faith, that's one thing. And that's okay. But I think that a person, as part of their psyche, needs to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed. It's always been part of my life. And when I ran a business for 100 years, I would always emphasize, being the most altruistic manager I could be. At the same time, concurrently, profit was not a dirty word. You have to make profit to pay your bills, pay your employees, pay your taxes, give your tithing to your church. So, making money is not a sin. It's the use of the money. What do you do with the money? And are you reflective enough to understand and prioritize where making money fits into your spiritual life?
Yeah. Sunday dinners, friendship dinners, coffees, lunches, not only do they make the economy go around, but it also develops this spirit of kinship and togetherness and community. And with that in mind, I got to say, hey, thanks for coming in and waking me up, Pat. I'm always appreciative of your viewpoints and your thoughts and reflections as far as where we are and living our life in this world. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank all of our viewers, and especially you, Mr. Vitucci, for showing up and giving us those wonderful thoughts.
It's always fun, Michael. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You've been listening to the Real Estate and More Show. I'd like to say thanks, viewers, for tuning in and hearing what we have to say today. And we'll be right back with our next special guest. Stay tuned.
Please remember to go to our new YouTube handle, My Real Talk Show. That's My Real Talk Show at youtube.com, and touch that subscribe button. You can also find past aired shows at our handle, My Real Talk Show, on youtube.com.